Today I'm going to try to draw this Dahlia in Kadriorg Park in Tallinn, Estonia. As mentioned yesterday, it's been a few days since I've made a video or even drawn at all, so this is my first step back into the practice. It's only been a few days, but any break in consistency, especially after 2 months, is bound to feel significant. Therefore, I chose something relatively small in scope. I wanted to avoid getting lost in any large compositions or like a world of detail. So I figured that getting up close to something like this, a flower, would be a nice way to ramp things back up. Little did I know just how complicated it would turn out to be. So starting off, I did not really know how to. Typically, I try to do one or two quick, small practice sketches in my pocket sketchbook, usually while the reference video is recording. And I do these primarily for the sake of getting my bearings. I just want to quickly wrap my head around the reference so that when I start recording, I have a basic understanding of the perspective, texture, how I might handle shading, and most importantly, and relevant to this one, my order of operations. Since the drawing is a lot less strict than most of my others, I didn't have to worry about most of that. So today I skipped that whole process altogether. My wife and I were sitting in the grass with our backs to what you see here, just enjoying the sun, looking out at the water, and appreciating each other's company. If I was to turn the camera around, you'd see the small pond and pavilion that I actually drew a few videos back. Anyway, thanks to that, I didn't take the time to put myself in the correct mindset, or rather prepared mindset. So I went into this totally blind, and it shows. I started with the middle, which I still think was probably the right move, but I do wish that I'd spent at least a minute or two observing the shapes of the petals, and specifically the ones that point directly out toward me. That said, while winging this wasn't the most optimal way to approach something new like this, it was refreshing. So much of this process is about progression, just by the nature of my amateur skill level, it kind of has to be. And candidly, that can get exhausting. Even when I draw things that I'm slightly more familiar or comfortable with, it can often feel like this purposeful practice rather than like casually enjoying a hobby. And maybe that's just the nature of making these videos. Maybe it feels like work because in many ways it is. However, even when I'm at home doodling this or that, I'm still approaching it with some intention to improve. When I think back to playing guitar, I think about learning, yes, but also just how much of it was strictly for the fun. And maybe the skill level would increase as a byproduct, but that would be in the background. Or something like skateboarding. Sure, there's a steep-ish learning curve if you've never been on a board before, but once you're comfortable riding around, it's not all practice, practice, practice if you don't want it to be. You can throw it in while you're out riding around with your friends if you want, but there's nothing wrong with embracing your tiny repertoire of tricks and just genuinely having fun with it. But with drawing, I don't know, it feels completely different. Maybe with skateboarding, the difference is so huge because one is more an activity than the other. So even just rolling down the street is technically doing it, whereas simply drawing a straight line on paper doesn't come with the same feelings. But still, I would expect drawing to eventually fit into a similar box, and not only when I've reached hyper proficiency. With all that, I'm happy to report that today's drawing gave me a glimpse of that. The drawing isn't and won't end up being very good, but it gave me this feeling that I really haven't felt thus far, and it's one of casual enjoyment. I had the sense that I was experiencing a hobby in a way that prior to pursuing it, I would have thought it would feel. I don't know exactly why it felt like that today. Maybe it was the lack of practice beforehand, or maybe it was just the nice day in the park, who knows. But yeah, it was a good feeling. Maybe I'll try to chase that alongside improvement. It might slow me down, I'm sure it will, but if it makes this process that much more enjoyable, I'd say it's worth it. If you have experience with this, specifically with drawing or painting or something that fits into this type of box, let me know what you think about that. Did it take you a while to relax into it? Was there a specific moment you remember, like a line you might have crossed when you felt comfortable and just completely content with the physical artistic process? I've had moments where I've been relaxed and enjoyed my time. I don't want you to get the impression that this has been all sacrifice and turmoil, but I will say there's almost always some background pressure. Like, okay, this is nice, but let's keep moving, let's keep improving. And I wonder if there will come a time when those things balance out, or maybe when I enjoy it as an activity even more than my desire to improve. As I say that, I feel like it probably depends on the person more than I'm acknowledging, as well as each person's individual goals. I recognize that I've set pretty loose yet high expectations for myself, so that no doubt has an effect on my experience. Still, let me know about yours, if you've gone through a similar process or have thought about the same sorts of things. Leave a comment if you'd like to divulge any of that. I'd love to hear about it. Okay, at this point, from a little far away, it might seem like things are headed in the right direction. The shape I have here is broadly accurate. It looks like a flower, I guess. But this is probably about the moment when things start to fall apart. And actually, even up to now, I've had a pretty hard time managing these shapes. So while it might look fine, I think that's just because, like I said, it looks like a flower. So really none of this has been great, but everything after the simple line drawing phase is where things get messy. My thought process here was to start adding some shadow, specifically underneath the petals. I kind of treated the in-between areas as the dark parts because I figured the overlap would cast shadow, which in some cases I guess is true, but that doesn't transfer well at all to the drawing. I make these dark areas pretty stark, the edges are really hard, and what's supposed to be subtle shadows actually end up looking like patterns on the petals themselves. So while I wasn't all that confident or happy with my little line drawing, at this point I'm starting to miss it. I've muddied this up so much that I lose any semblance of delicate cleanliness I once had. Something I really struggled with here, above all, I think, was depth. I wanted to give myself the best opportunity to draw as uncartoonish a flower as possible. So for one thing, I chose a flower that was in the sun a bit more than the others, so I would have some darkness to observe, although we can see how that's going. And for another, and probably more importantly, I offset my perspective. So the angle at which I'm viewing the flower isn't head on, which I was hoping would help me avoid flattening it out. I'm sure you can imagine what this would have looked like had I drawn it from the top down and screwed up the shading. However, even still, in my opinion, I fail to imply depth. Again, this is something I probably could have practiced beforehand, granted, but I don't know how much it would have helped. I think my abilities are significantly lower than I think with regard to a complex subject like this one. But that's also not as disheartening as it sounds, because I also don't think that the specific skills to draw something like this are necessarily difficult to acquire. It seems like they would be specific enough to grasp quickly, given enough repetition, and it really comes down to experience. I know that sounds obvious and kind of stupid, but I'm comparing this to maybe an entire landscape or street side where there might be a multitude of subjects and techniques to employ. If I walked around for an hour, I'd walk past near infinite little details, all of which come with their own technical demands. Whereas every dahlia I find will share a similar pattern that I can follow, notwithstanding the specific light and stage of blooming or whatever. So at the end of the day, I actually think this is a complex subject with a simple solution, but one I've had close to no experience with. If memory serves, this is only the third time I've attempted something like this. So actually, no, I'm pretty sure I'm doing fine. This is fine. Okay, I hate it. Forget all that stuff I just said. I really don't like this at all. I think I messed things up with the contextual bits as well. They're pretty ugly and careless, if I'm honest. So I wish I would have stopped while I was ahead, which actually, like I said, was even before I got into any of the shading. This should have been a line drawing. I was having such a good time. Oh well, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if you liked this video, go watch another one. There are plenty. And if you'd like to show your support, consider subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to watch this one. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.